Hi, welcome to a new video. If you're new here, my name is Amandine. I've been living in Singapore for 5 years, and on this channel I like to share about anything that's happening in Singapore. Today I want to share about the pros and cons of living in Singapore, as now it's been a few years that I'm living here and I feel I became more critical about life in Singapore. And while there is a lot to love, things are not always as straightforward as they seem, so let's dive right into it. Let's start with one of the clearest pros of living in Singapore: the safety and the stability. Singapore is known as one of the safest places in the world. With strict laws and low crime rate, it's hard to beat the level of security here. Singapore takes its regulations seriously, and the punishment for serious crimes such as drug-related are severe. While that sounds intimidating, in the daily life you just enjoy the benefits of having this place that is feeling safe and secure without still being constantly reminded about the rules. Some people might feel overwhelmed with the amount of CCTV that there are here, but honestly, after a while you even forget that they are there. And for those of us that are women, it's really a big plus. You can walk alone at night knowing that your security is not compromised. And another aspect of the security here is how politically stable Singapore is. The government is efficient and stable, and when you compare with what's happening in Europe or in the US, you feel really happy to be in Singapore. Another big pro of living in Singapore is the quality of life. One thing that really stood out to me when I first came to live in Singapore is how everything is convenient here. The city excels in urban planning, meaning that every neighborhood will have what it needs in close proximity, like a doctor office, a park, supermarket, food options. And even if this is not enough, Singapore has one of the best public transportation. The MRT and buses are efficient, clean and affordable, so it's not really a hassle to go around the city. For expat moving to Singapore and coming to live in condo, you will really feel your standard of living becoming very high, because this condo comes often with different facilities such as a swimming pool, a tennis court, gym, so it often feels just like you are living in a resort. Another aspect that really enhances the quality of life in Singapore is how clean and well maintained the city is. It's easy to take it for granted, but whenever I travel outside of Singapore, I'm reminded how much I love this level of cleanliness and how much it makes the city welcoming and comfortable to live in. And there is also the bureaucracy in Singapore that is incredibly efficient and fast. Whether you are opening a bank account, a phone line, or doing your taxes, the processes are often really straightforward and quick. Often you can do it online. You don't need to send any emails or even worse, letters, which saves you the time and the hassle as compared to many other places. You have no idea the struggle it is in France. But one of the biggest highlights of living in Singapore, and everyone will tell you that, is that it's a food paradise. Whether you are craving local or international dishes, I'm pretty sure Singapore has it. From hawker centers to restaurants, you literally have all the options in the world. Singapore food scene is incredibly diverse. Of course, you have to try the local dishes such as laksa, chicken rice and satay, but you can also have Korean, Japanese, Indian and even French. I do not miss French food in Singapore because I can just have it any day right here in Singapore. Every corner there is a food option, so you will definitely not go hungry in Singapore. And especially at hawker centers, the food is quite affordable. A meal will cost you between $3 to $8. But if you want to eat healthy on a more regular basis, then it might become a bit more expensive. If you do groceries, fresh produces might not be as cheap as compared to other places. However, for me, the quality and the variety makes up for it. Now let's talk about the weather. I put it as a pros of living in Singapore, but it really depends from person to person. Singapore is located just north of the equator, which gives a tropical climate all year round, which makes the weather pretty predictable, which is a relief for people like me who like stability. You don't need to have different wardrobe for different seasons or worry about temperature change, because the weather just gonna stay the same. Only right now, because it's January, it's quite rainy outside, it's the monsoon season. Otherwise, Singapore is sunny most days which I feel really helps boost your mood. The days are long, which is great for outdoor activities, and it's only rarely that you're going to be disturbed by the rain. But of course, for some, the heat and the humidity might be too much to handle. The lack of season might also feel monotonous for some people. To help break down the year, I think it's better to focus on, for example, the different cultural events that Singapore has throughout the year. Whether it's Chinese New Year, Hari Raya, Deepavali, there is always something to look forward to. But yeah, let's be honest, Singapore might not be the best place to spend Christmas. And my last pro of living in Singapore is how easy it is to integrate in Singapore society. One of the biggest reasons for that is that English is widely spoken. So if you know or can learn English yourself, it's rarely that you're gonna experience language barrier in Singapore. Singapore is incredibly diverse and tolerant, with its blend of Chinese, Indian, Malay, and other cultures. People are used to differences. It's quite welcoming for newcomers because you don't have to worry about fitting a single cultural mold. And whether you're local or an expat, there are plenty of social events that are opportunities to meet new people. Depending what's your passion, there are different networking events or cultural festivals that are gonna cater to your interests. But making deeper connection with local might be a little bit more challenging, especially if you meet them later in life. That being said, I'm pretty sure that if you put in the effort, you will still be able to make meaningful connections over time. As for making friends with other expats, it might be also a bit tricky. Many expats come and go, so it's not rare that you have to change your friends every now and then, especially if you are the one that stays the longest. So it's quite hard to make long-term friendship, but it's also an opportunity to always meet new people from all over the world. But now let's talk about the first con of living in Singapore, which is the high cost of living. Singapore is always ranked as one of the most expensive cities to live in, and the rent is a big contributor to this. Rent is among one of the highest globally, even though the prices kind of stabilized after the pandemic, where the price really spiked over 40% because of supply shortage and construction delay. So renting, especially as an expat where you are renting a condo, will eat a big part of your budget. And Singapore, like many other countries, has felt the pinch of inflation. Everything from transportation to food has become more expensive. And even though you could argue that living as a local in Singapore might not be that expensive, expats don't really have the same options, especially concerning rent, where locals might choose to stay with their parents until they are able to buy a property. Expats simply don't have this option. You might also want to indulge in comfort food or try new activities, especially as you are setting in and trying to integrate. All those little things adds up, so that's why it's hard to live on a tight budget in Singapore. Now let's talk about space constraint, as it's another challenge that comes with living in Singapore. Singapore is pretty small, so space comes at a premium, and it reflects in the space of the apartments and homes. Especially for private condo, you might find your private space to be quite limited. You can still make the best use of your space, but it's still quite a noticeable difference. To give you an idea, here we are 3 people living. It's a 2-bedroom and it's 600 square feet. Another aspect of this space constraint is how crowded popular area can get. Some cafes or restaurants will get trendy and then they will get flooded by people, and in the end it makes the experience feel less enjoyable. And as a global travel hub, of course, Singapore attracts millions of tourists every year, so it's not only crowded by locals but also by tourists. The upside though is that Singapore offers a lot to do and to see beyond the typical tourist path. If you are able to go just a bit further from the usual attraction, you will find hidden gems, nice parks, underrated food that are really worth the try. I'm always happy to share about places I like on my Instagram, so join me there if it's not already the case. Another challenge of life in Singapore is the work-life balance, which I wasn't feeling at the beginning, but it's slowly getting to me. There is a peer pressure to do well at work, is both motivating and stressful. Luckily, in my case, I don't do a lot of overtime, but it's something that can be required from you, especially if you have deadline to meet or if you need to handle some workload. And while Singapore is a fantastic travel hub with easy access to nearby countries, you might not always have the time to travel because Singapore doesn't have that many holidays. For example, my company is giving us 14 paid leave. There is also public holidays, so you really have to be smart with it and arrange weekends, long weekends, and travel whenever you can. But you might not be able to have long extended break as you can have, for example, in France. And lastly, let's talk about the job market challenge, because I know it's a big cons of living in Singapore for many. The job market in Singapore is highly competitive, and it's especially true for expat, because companies have to prioritize hiring locals or permanent residents over foreign workers. There are opportunities in various industries, but it's just that you really have to go the extra miles to promote your skills and to network. And it's also because of the strict work visa regulations that there are in Singapore. The system to issue work pass is quite straightforward, but also quite tight, with a lot of requirements such as minimum salary and minimum qualifications. And companies, whenever they are hiring foreign workers, they really have to justify their choice by saying that they were not able to find any other suitable candidate among the local pool. With the recent restriction, I've heard of many cases of EPs that were not able to get renewed. For expat on a work visa, there is always a certain level of uncertainty. So if you are planning to come work in Singapore, it's really something that you need to know. It's gonna get stressful at times. But all those cons, at least for me, are not necessarily deal breakers. It's just things that you need to keep in mind. Overall, living in Singapore is an incredible experience, and like any other places, it comes with its own set of ups and downs. If you are considering moving to Singapore, I really hope that this brings you clarity. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and you subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want to share your own experience about living and moving to Singapore. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.